All right, making a cup from start to finish. I've seen a lot of people that are concerned because they haven't seen a cup that was done like right from step one. So I have my cup. Now you'll notice it has a bit of spray paint on it. This was a cup that I had done something with. I had to put it in the strip pile, stripped it. Some of the paint has still stayed on. That's totally okay. We're gonna treat this just like you would if you had a brand new cup that had, you know, the spiffy stainless. I am gonna repaint it and everything. So use a bit of imagination. This is a stainless steel cup, just like normal. So we're gonna start by washing the cup. You do this to get rid of any residues that are on the cup or any oils or anything from the manufacturing process. You can obviously do this just in your sink. I'm doing it here so you can see. So just like washing regular dishes, a little bit of soap. And soapy water. Okay, and I'm just gonna wash it just like I would any other dish. Remember that these cups are not dishwasher safe before you put epoxy on them, and they are definitely not dishwasher safe after you put epoxy on them. Now rinse it off. From here you can either wet sand or dry sand. All that means is having this and this wet, or this and this dry. Not a really big deal. I have some soapy water here, so I'm gonna do a wet sand. The nice thing about wet sanding is that you do reduce the amount of dust. So better, especially if you are not wearing any mask. Now the point of sanding right now is not to completely annihilate the finish. It's just to scratch it so that there's more space for it to grip. So we're just gonna little rounds. I'm using a 60 grit sandpaper because I'm lazy. I don't want to put a lot of effort into it. But you can use whatever you have. The lower the number, the less effort you have to put in. But you do want to be careful as well. All right, rinse that off. All right, it's now nicely sanded, a little scuffed up. Dry it off. And then I like to let it sit for at least a half an hour just to make sure that it is really, really dry. Spray paint is an oil-based product, and this of course is water. Oil and water do not mix nicely together. All right, so my cup is now nice and dry, and it is ready for its primer layer. You have two choices for this. I really like this little Lazy Susan. It was just a cheap plastic one I got. I will try and find a link for you, but it was just what I happen to have. Or you can actually use one of the arms. Most people will use an arm. I prefer this. I also have this cute little kitty tent that I got from Walmart for about $15. It does have a vent on the top, so I put a little towel or something there, and I do use just a cloth at the bottom. But this allows me to spray paint in a garage or a patio or somewhere where I normally wouldn't, because if you haven't used spray paint, the little aerosol drops get everywhere, and so you get this like fine film of spray paint. So I'm going to show you with this just because most people use it, though normally I will use this. So I like to use a plastic bag over this. That just protects the arm from getting a whole bunch of spray paint on it, because I have had spray paint start to flake off. I'm just gonna, doesn't have to be perfect. And I do the same thing when I'm hydro dipping. This will make it more difficult to get this on, because you're basically creating an air seal. Just push it on so it's on. If you are doing this A technique, you are going to need to have some kind of drying rack, or else you are going to be holding this until it dries, which is not fun. Worst case scenario, you could probably put this in like a mason jar or something. Just make sure it's not something you care about. All right. So we're going to shake this up really well. You can hear this one's almost empty. Shake. Okay, this one is a squeeze top, so I squeeze it off. Don't try and get full coverage on the first layer. That's totally okay to have to put a second layer on, and much better than having to deal with drips later. When you spray, you're gonna spray across it. If you try and spray just the amount, then when you go back over it, you're actually doubling the spray paint in certain spots, which will cause more drips. And I really should be wearing a mask. 1 second. It is totally optional. You can spray paint the whole cup white, and it'll be totally fine. I am going to be doing an ombre with this one, so I am going to spray paint the bottom a darker color. If you've never worked with spray paint, or if you are not very good with spray paint, I would just suggest staying with white. It just might mean a little bit more glitter when it comes to that part. There you go. As you saw before, I like to wipe this off. It just helps prevent clogs from happening. And I'm going to let this dry, and then it'll be good to start with the epoxy method for glitter. If you didn't get full coverage, totally fine, just repeat the same process. Now, if you do this holding method, much better to wear a glove to prevent getting spray paint all over your arm. But again, this is my preferred method. And if you have a larger space or can get some paint on, say, grass, then even just put a bucket upside down, put the cup on there upside down, and then just spray, just go around the bucket yourself. All right, so my cup is now dry. I didn't bother putting another coat of spray paint on, so as you can see, it's not perfect. That's totally okay. I do find that if you use a gloss spray paint, it takes a lot longer, so I ended up leaving it overnight. So I took the plastic bag off. I have put the arm back in. You may find when you try and take the plastic bag off that it kind of suctions and you kind of have to give it, kind of wiggle it to get it off. Just put those on. We're going to hold on to the attachment, squeeze it in there, make sure it's nice and tight. You hold on to this part just so that you're not actually trying to move the motor, which could damage it. We are going to do the epoxy method for our glitter. So we will turn on our turner. And I am using a 2 to 3 RPM motor on this turner, just to make sure that it is nice and slow, which is especially good for new users. I also have a piece of paper underneath here, which will catch my glitter, because I'm going to put way more on, or I'm going to sprinkle it on over top, and most of it's going to end up on the paper. I'm going to use most of what's in these jars. Maybe not quite most, but you get the idea. So I have my epoxy. I keep syringes in there. That way it makes it really easy for measuring. Now with the epoxy method, we do not put a lot of epoxy on at all. It's going to be quite a lot of work to make sure that the epoxy moves all over your cup. I usually do about 1 to 2 mils of each part, so you'll end up with 2 to 4. If you're starting out, definitely try doing 2. You will not use it all. It's great if you have a little mold that you can put some extra in it. But the biggest thing is if you measure your epoxy, you put too much in, do not try and use all of it. You will use way more glitter, and that is just a waste. You're going to want 2 pieces of paper, 1 for each of the colors. So I'm going to put my gloves on, and I am going to put my respirator on. Start with resin. Try and make sure that there is no bubbles, or as few bubbles as possible in there. You'll see this one has quite a bit more bubbles. So I'm just going to let it sit while it floats up to the top. It's a lot easier to adjust the hardener than the epoxy, so that's why I suggest doing the epoxy first. I am going to mix. You'll notice when you start mixing that it's kind of foggy. It gets kind of foggy on you. That means that it is interacting. Scrape the edges, scrape the bottom, mix, scrape off the mixer, take that part that you've just scraped, mix it back in, mix it really well. Starting to clear up, you see. Keep scraping those edges, especially with small portions like this. You do not want to have it unmixed. Scrape this part. All right, you can see it's gone really nice and clear. There's still some bubbles, that's okay. We can start using that. So we're going to put just a little bit on here, and we're just going to work it over the cup. I like to start at the top edge and then do the bottom edge, bottom, and then work on the rest. Basically the parts that are going to be harder and cause you the most grief first when you have the most epoxy. You can kind of start seeing the shiny part. Make sure you get any grooves. If you end up with too much on it, you can definitely still take a paper towel, rub it off, and then just smooth it out with your fingers. And I did about 1.5, and see, I've got probably enough to do another cup. But you really don't want to mix too little. Mixing less than 1 or 2 mils, it makes it really, really hard to mix and make sure that you've mixed it properly. So we're going to start with white. I always like to start with the lighter color because it's easier to blend into the dark than it is to try and get it to blend into the light. We're just going to sprinkle it on. as you get to the middle part, you can lift your thing up a little bit more and be really, really light with it. Okay, see, I've used about half. Tap this off to help tap any off. Use the paper. So you're going to just pour into it. Use a different piece of paper for every different color. You don't want to end up with a bunch of little blue parts in this or a bunch of little white parts in this one. I start at the bottom and I'm going to work my way in again. Give it a little tap off. All right, now I'm going to stop my turner. I'm going to twist this off. Now my bottom's not done, right? I'm going to actually just tap it onto the sheet that I have here. Give it a little tap off again. And there you have it. It's done. Now it can just go into your drying rack and it can dry. You'll want it to dry for 6 to 8 hours. All right. So we have allowed this to dry. I let it dry overnight. So it is ready. However, because I used 2 colors of glitter, I am going to seal it. If you use 1 color of fine glitter, you do not need to seal. However, if you use chunky glitter, if you use more than 1 color, or if you do a tack it method, you will want to seal. The chunky and the tack it will want to repel the epoxy, which means you'll end up with like almost little like water spots of epoxy and then the rest not. And if you do not seal 2 colors, then you have a tendency of having 1 color want to move to the other. I haven't bothered to brush this off or anything. It's on there really good. I did tap it, obviously, as you saw in the last section. So make sure that you are using a clear spray paint. It doesn't matter if it is matte or gloss on this. All you're wanting to do is just help make sure that the glitter stays where it's supposed to be. Shake really well. And there you are. Let this dry. Shouldn't take too long, especially if you used matte 1 or 2 hours, and then you can go on to the next section. All right, so the sealer is now dry on this, my clear spray paint. So I am ready for my first coat of epoxy. Now, glitter will soak epoxy up. So for this cup, I will do about 10 mils of each, so 20 mils total. Whereas a normal layer I would do probably about 7 mils each. So I'm going to put it on my turner. Now you do want to make sure that your cup is level. So what you're going to do is you're going to put this here. If you notice that this bubble is not right in between the 2 black lines, you are going to need to adjust it. So you can take a piece of wood or a piece of cardboard or a couple pieces of cardboard. If it needs to go this way to level, you can put something on the back underneath, and if it needs to go up a little bit, then you're just going to put it under the front. And the further out you have it, the less it will do. All right. Make sure you have some kind of, most of the time I actually just use a piece of paper under here that I like, the paper that comes with Amazon packages. Just packing paper, whatever you have, just keep it, and then you don't have to buy something, and it can be reused. I have a sheet right here that's got, you know, a lot on it. Once in a while, I even will hose it off and let it dry off, and reuse it again if it gets something like glitter on it. Okay, so I've positioned this. Now don't worry about positioning this over here. You want to make sure that it's centered on your cup so that if it gets any drops, it goes on the paper and not onto your lovely table. Of course, gonna start with my respirator. Resin first. Let any bubbles float up to the top, and then you can squeeze them out. Mix it up really, really well. Scrape around the edges, scrape the bottom, scrape the stir stick, scrape what you just grabbed. See how it's gotten nice and clear now. I let the epoxy dribble over the edge to do the bottom. When you're done, give it a little bit of heat. And this will now sit and run for about 6 hours. To clean off what you were using so that you can reuse it, take a baby wipe, wipe off your stick, just let it sit on top there. I don't usually wipe these out, I just let them sit on a nice level surface. When they're dry, you can just reuse them. All right, now it is good to sit for about 6 hours, and then it can go on your drying rack for another couple of hours, and you'll be good for the next coat. All right, so the cup is now dry and it is ready to go. Now we're gonna do a light sanding on this. We're gonna and then we'll put our decal. If you are putting a water slide on this, you will wanna put the water slide on first and then sand around. Because if you put the sand and then put the water slide down, you'll get a slightly hazy look underneath the water slide after you put the epoxy on, and you don't want that to happen. So we're gonna hope that this is gonna be our last coat of epoxy. Chances are, because it is glitter, you'll probably need one more coat, but we can cross our fingers and hope. So because of that, I always like to take a little more effort on the rim and do a little bit more sanding on the bottom edge, being very, very careful not to sand through anything. So we're gonna clean the edge off. To do this, we're gonna use an X-Acto knife. Now, some people are really nervous about using an X-Acto knife, and for good reason. I'm gonna actually using a cutting board, and I'm going to go down. That way, if it loses control, it goes into my cutting board, not into my leg, not into my hand, anything like that. So always try and make sure that you're facing down. And you can get a cutting board at even Dollar Tree, or do it outside on your cement, whatever. Though that will dull your blade if you continually smack it in. So we're gonna go down and we're just gonna kind of do a slight motion in, almost like a sawing motion, but just let the motion carry you. See, I'm keeping my fingers completely out of the way. All right, now, even if you're gonna use the blade again, I always put it back in. That way, if it falls or if you put your hand somewhere weird, you're not accidentally stabbing yourself. So I'm gonna start by sanding the top, and then I'm actually gonna do a slight angle and sand all the way around. Make sure that you're careful again here. You could end up sanding through if you're not careful. If you do, just dab a little bit of paint onto that spot and a little bit of glitter and you'll be good to go. Use your fingers, check and make sure that it's nice and rounded. Now I'm doing a slight angle as I go just to help round it off. And we are sanding, so it is best to use a mass or to wet sand. I don't have my own mass, so I am just going to use my Respirator. At this point, you're probably going, oh no, I've wrecked my cup, because it looks almost like there's a white cloudiness to your glitter. That's okay, it'll come back in the next coat. So the cup is dry now from putting the spray paint on. And again, the only reason that we did that was because we sprinkled these on and they weren't sealed. And anytime you do chunky, you always want to seal it. Okay, so we are going to put the decal on now. You can use stickers if you don't have a vinyl cutter. You can cut vinyl from a Cricut or a Silhouette or Brother Scan, whatever you have. You can also use water slide, tattoos, pretty much anything that you can somehow adhere to here, or you can figure out how to use. I'm going to be doing a vinyl on this one, so I figured I'd show you how I go about weeding. So we are going to start by the traditional weeding style, and I like my needle nose tweezers there. I'm just going to pull it up, being very careful around any little pieces. Make sure you're doing this in a really well lit area. If some of it comes up, right, then you can kind of just give it a little lift and it should sit back down where it's supposed to. Make sure you get any little pieces. All right, so we have that. Now, as you can see, this did not come up as easily as it really should have, and that's just because I just got a new machine and I'm still working on tweaking the cutting settings. So what we're gonna do, it's a good habit to get into to put the lid on when we are, before we apply a decal. It's not really important unless it's got a twist on, although it will show you if you line one up on this side, then you get the exact opposite by lining it up on the little tag part on the back. But it also, if you twist it on, then you can actually make sure it lines up perfectly instead of having it a little bit janky. So we're gonna just put that lid back on. I've got my little holder here. So if you're having trouble cutting the vinyl, then what we can do is we can actually take our clear sheet, take the whole piece, peel off the back, put the whole thing like this on there, making sure that that is centered and making sure it's upright. Give it a little, it's called burnishing. Peel off your cover sheet. Now, we're going to peel off our vinyl. Just find a corner. And as you can see, it should come off a lot easier this time. And that is just because it's actually adhering to the cup, so it makes it a little bit easier to work with. This is also a really good method if you're dealing with something that's really fine, that you're worried about losing pieces, or that because it's really fine, it's just having a hard time coming up. One spot that didn't want to burnish, so you still want to be gentle so that you don't break it. Really make sure that you are doing this in a well-lit area. And you can, the big piece, you can actually put so that the sticky part is out, and that works really well for dropping any tiny pieces that you get. So then it makes it easier to have it come off of your tweezers. All right, so there is one part of it. This is fairly skinny, so I'm gonna do this the same way I just did the last one. All right, and let's do the bottom one. So this is the part that we had already weeded. Notice how I am peeling the backing off versus trying to pull this part off. Okay. Keep this straight while we're doing this. Push down. And peel the back off. All right, second part done. All right, to do the back side. Now this is where we're gonna make sure that this lid is fully open and that it is lined up right in the middle of our words. That a little bit. Okay. and then make sure that that is right down. Now notice that I did not put this on straight. Be really, really cautious if you do this, and line up with this, not with this. If you try and line up with this, this is going to be very off. There you are. That side is done. Okay, fingers crossed this will be our last coat. We're concerned about 7 mils again per part for each of these. Now we may still have to put one more coat on, but we just got our fingers crossed that this will be it. Mask on. All right, so it's been about an hour, maybe 45 minutes. I'm just checking on the cup to make sure that there is no bubbles or there's no vinyl spots or a bug hasn't landed in it, just making sure that the cup is doing well. This would be another good time to hit it with a little bit more heat if you are seeing any bubbles. The cup is dry, yay! So if you do feel this and you still feel a lot of weird spots or you know, the top edge isn't smooth, the bottom edge isn't smooth, you missed a spot, whatever, you may have to put another coat of epoxy on, that's okay. If you do, I usually do about 5 mils of each for that final layer, just to try and prevent adding too much weight. But if you are done, we're going to do the final cleaning of the edge. Now remember that we did sand around that top edge right before the last coat, so it should be really easy this time. I have a Q-tip, I have some acetone, I have my X-Acto knife, a sanding brush, and a piece of paper towel. And I also have one of the 4-part nail buff spots. So if you find that you have like a weird little spot and it's just like one random spot, you can take this, start with the 1, go really tiny, and keep going all the way to the 4. It will not be quite as shiny. However, for myself, I find a lot of times it's more noticeable feeling it versus seeing it. So that is a kind of last resort kind of thing. So we're gonna start by, and I of course have my cutting board. So we're gonna start by cleaning off this edge. Just saw. If you have any spots inside, you can kind of just push this under and just flick. Careful, because you can scratch that fairly easily. Just give it a little feel. Okay, I take my sanding block now and I go around the top. And then just to make sure that it's a really nice smooth, I do a slight incline. So I'm talking, if this is flat, I do like this, just a slight incline around the cup. You want to be very careful not to sand through anything here, but it just helps soften up the edges. If you do too much, you will scratch the coating and then you'll have to do it again. So it's really small. We're just feeling. You can also do straight up. And just give it a feel. All right. Now, if you ended up getting any like weird spots inside, kind of like, let's see, like that, you can take a little acetone on a Q-tip. And see how it's going away? You're gonna see what I'm doing here. You can also, if you got any spray paint inside, just give it a little once over. See? And then we'll just wash it and it'll be ready to send out. All right, so for my final washing, I like to use these. It's not a Brillo pad, it's the cheaper dollar store one, so it's really soft, but it does work nicely. A sponge or just a regular cloth will work too. So I use a little bit of soap on my, wet it down, and then just like normal, you're washing any other cup, any hand washing kind of activity. The inside. Once you've washed it, you may find that there's a little spot that you've missed with the acetone on the inside, so keep your scrubby pad or whatever soapy. Take a cloth, just wipe it off.